The morning of my 30th birthday started not with a kiss or a card, but with a distinct rhythmic thud of Mark's gym bag hitting the floorboards. It was 5 a.m., the hour of his dedication, a time he reserved for sculpting a body that I was increasingly convinced was meant for someone else's eyes. I lay under the duvet, tracing the outline of the diamond on my finger, waiting. Just a whisper. A reminder that he remembered the woman he had promised to cherish for life. He didn't speak. He didn't even look at the bed. He just moved through our master suite like a ghost, haunting a house he was already planning to abandon, his movements sharp and efficient. He poured his protein shake with a loud, aggressive rattle of the metal whisk. He checked his phone, a small smirk playing on his lips, a look I hadn't seen directed at me in over a year, before shoving it into his pocket and heading for the door. "Mark?" I called out, my voice sounding thin and brittle in the cold air. He paused, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He didn't turn around. "I'm in a rush, Sarah. The quarterly projections are due today." "Don't wait up." The door clicked shut, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the room pressing against my eardrums. I had spent the last 3 days leaving subtle hints, magazines left open to find jewelry pages, a calendar marked with a gold star, even a casual mention of a restaurant I'd been dying to try. But as the clock ticked toward noon, then 4, then 8, it became painfully clear. My existence had been scrubbed from his internal schedule. By 9 p.m., the candles I'd lit on the dining room table had burned down into messy puddles of wax. The lasagna I'd spent hours preparing sat congealed and pathetic in its glass dish. I wasn't crying anymore. The anger had moved past the hot, frantic stage and had settled into something cold, dense, and heavy in the pit of my stomach. It was a clarity I hadn't felt in a decade. When the garage door finally rumbled open at midnight, I didn't rush to greet him. I sat in the dark, watching the shadow of his silhouette stretch across the kitchen floor. He walked in, humming, his tie undone and his jacket slung over his shoulder, looking for all the world like a man who had enjoyed his day immensely. He flicked on the light, squinted at the untouched dinner, and sighed with the exaggerated annoyance of a man burdened by a needy wife. "Still up?" he asked, not checking his watch, but certainly noting the inconvenience of my presence. "I told you not to wait. I had to entertain the new associates. It went late." I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the hard wood. I walked toward the counter, picking up the small, thick envelope I had hidden beneath a stack of mail earlier that day. I didn't say a word. I just slid the document across the granite island, the sound of the paper rasping against the stone filling the room. He looked down at it, his brows knitting together in confusion. "What is this?" he scoffed, reaching for it with a lazy, dismissive hand. As he pulled the first page out, his face went pale, his jaw going slack as he read the bold, stark heading. He looked up at me, his eyes darting wildly, looking for the joke, looking for the weakness he assumed I would always have. "You're joking," he whispered, his voice trembling. "This is because I forgot one day? You're throwing away 10 years over a birthday?" I stepped into the light, my eyes locking onto his, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw genuine, unadulterated fear in his expression. "It wasn't just a birthday, Mark," I said, my voice steady as stone. "It was the day I realized that while you were out forgetting me, I had already finished moving out of your life, and you didn't even notice the boxes." Mark's mouth worked, but no sound came out. He looked at the legal documents, the bold, unforgiving typeface of the filing, as if they were written in an ancient, cursed language. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator. He tossed the papers back onto the island, a desperate, nervous laugh bubbling up in his throat. "You're hysterical," he spat, his face flushing a mottled, angry red. You've been watching too many of those trashy Lifetime movies, Sarah. A divorce? Over a lapse in memory? You're acting like a child. Go to bed, sleep it off, and we'll burn these papers in the morning. I'll buy you something expensive. A vacation. Whatever keeps you quiet. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just walked to the pantry and opened the floor-to-ceiling cabinet. It was bare. Perfectly, unnervingly empty. No boxes of pasta, no jars of sauce, no snacks. Just the echoing hollow of a space stripped of its purpose. I turned back to him, my hands folded neatly in front of me. I don't want a vacation, Mark. I want you to look at the second page, the one where I've already listed the assets. He grabbed the stack again, his movements frantic now. He flipped through the pages, his eyes darting across columns of numbers, dates, and account titles. His breathing hitched. He stopped, his finger trembling as he pointed to a line item. The offshore account? The investment firm in the Caymans? How did you... I keep those records encrypted. You don't have the password. I didn't need the password, I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy register. I needed a curious mind and an idle afternoon while you were busy entertaining associates, who, by the way, have been posting photos of their golf trip in Myrtle Beach all day. You weren't at work, Mark. You were where you always go when you think I'm too domestic to notice the patterns. He went deathly still. The arrogance that usually defined his posture, the broad shoulders, the cocked chin, seemed to deflate. He looked around our kitchen, really looked at it, and for the first time, he noticed the subtle absences. The missing photos from the mantel, the empty space on the bookshelf where my favorite leather-bound journals used to sit. The house didn't just feel cold, it felt abandoned. It was a showroom, not a home. You've been planning this, he whispered, the realization dawning on him with the force of a physical blow. All those times you said you were going to the library or visiting your mother. You were meeting with lawyers? Building a case? Since when? Since the day you missed our 5th anniversary, I replied. I realized then that I was just an accessory in your life. A piece of furniture you expected to be there when you got home, but didn't bother to dust. I've been building my own life outside of this cage for 5 years. I'm not throwing away a marriage, Mark. I'm simply finishing a project that started long ago. He reached out, his hand hovering over my wrist as if to pull me back, to demand compliance. But I stepped back, my movement fluid and deliberate. He lunged forward, not in a romantic gesture, but with a sudden, sharp desperation. He grabbed my phone off the counter, his thumb frantically trying to unlock it, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unbridled malice. You think you're so smart, he hissed, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with a menace I had never seen before. You think you can just walk away with half of everything? You don't know what you've actually walked into, Sarah. You think you've been investigating me? You haven't even scratched the surface of what's kept in those accounts. He held the phone up, a jagged grin spreading across his face, and tapped the screen once, hard. A notification popped up, a live feed from a security camera. He turned the screen toward me, and my blood turned to liquid nitrogen. It wasn't our house. It was the interior of a room I recognized, a storage unit I had rented under a false name, where I kept the physical evidence of his true business dealings. The door to the unit was wide open, and inside, 2 men in black windbreakers were systematically removing my files, my laptop, and the flash drives containing his entire undoing. You didn't forget me, Sarah, he whispered, leaning in so close I could smell the stale scent of cheap gin on his breath. You were just too stupid to realize you were being hunted. And now? You're not getting a divorce. You're getting a funeral. The cold light of the phone screen illuminated the cruelty in his eyes, a stark, jagged landscape of malice I had never once suspected existed behind his curated corporate facade. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I forced my breathing to remain shallow, controlled. I couldn't let him see the terror. If he knew I was afraid, he had already won. "You think you're the only one who can hide things in plain sight?" I said, my voice eerily steady despite the ringing in my ears. I didn't look at the screen again. I looked directly into his pupils, cold and dilated. "Did you really think I'd put all my eggs in one basket? That I'd trust a single rented storage unit with the only leverage I had against a man like you?" Mark laughed, a sharp, barking sound that held no humor. He tossed my phone onto the floor, the screen shattering with a sickening crunch. "Nice bluff, Sarah. But we both know you're a creature of routine. You're organized, you're meticulous, and you're predictable. You wanted to play detective, so you left a paper trail. I've spent the last 6 months watching you walk straight into every trap I set." He took a step toward me, crowding my space, his tall frame blocking the exit to the hallway. The air in the kitchen felt heavy, electric with the threat of violence. For a moment, the civilized veneer of our home vanished entirely, replaced by the primitive reality of predator and prey. "I'm not the same woman who married you, Mark," I whispered, backing away until my heels hit the island. "You spent years training me to be invisible. You taught me how to operate in the shadows of your life. And while you were busy checking your offshore accounts and playing games with your associates, you forgot the most important lesson you ever taught me: how to survive in a house where everything is a lie." I reached behind me, my fingers brushing against the heavy, stainless steel knife block I had meticulously rearranged earlier that morning. My hand closed around the handle of the chef's knife, the one I'd sharpened until it could slice through silk. "What are you doing?" he sneered, his eyes darting to my hands. He didn't look worried, he looked amused. "You're going to threaten me? With a knife? You don't have the stomach for it, Sarah. You're a librarian. You're a wife. You're a ghost." "I am the person who knows where every single body is buried," I countered, my grip tightening on the handle. "And I wasn't just collecting files, Mark. I was auditing your life. Did you ever wonder why the tax returns for the last 3 years didn't match the bank statements you tried to hide? Or why your investments have been bleeding capital into shell companies that lead back to my mother's maiden name?" His face shifted, the smugness evaporating into a pale, sickly mask of confusion. He froze, his hand halfway to his belt where I knew, for the first time, he kept the concealed holster he thought I hadn't noticed. "What did you do?" "I didn't just file for divorce," I said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my lips that mirrored his own from minutes before. "I opened an investigation with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And that wasn't a live feed of your thugs cleaning out my storage unit, Mark. That was a live feed of a tactical team entering your private server room in the city, downloading every single file you own." I gestured to the wall clock. 12:15 a.m. "The timer on your hard drive wipeout just hit 0, I whispered. And the second the firewall dropped, the files were sent automatically to every major news outlet and the SEC. You're not just losing a wife tonight, Mark. You're losing your empire." The front door kicked open with a thunderous crash, splintering the frame and sending wood shards flying across the foyer. Blue and red lights pulsed through the windows, turning our pristine kitchen into a strobe-lit nightmare of shadows and urgency. Mark spun around, his hand flying to his waist, but as he turned, he realized he wasn't looking at my file storage unit on the phone anymore. The screen had updated. It was a live feed of our own front porch, showing 3 officers in tactical gear with their weapons drawn, sprinting toward the kitchen door. Mark turned back to me, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred, and for the first time, he pulled the gun from his holster. But he didn't point it at me. He pointed it at the kitchen window, screaming a name I didn't recognize into the void. Before he could pull the trigger, the kitchen lights went pitch black, and a voice, not an officer's, but a cold, feminine voice I had never heard, spoke from the darkness behind him. "Drop it, Mark. We've been waiting for you to make a move." The silence that followed the woman's voice was heavier than the darkness itself. Mark froze, the gun trembling in his grip, his silhouette framed against the strobing blue lights bleeding in from the front yard. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. He knew the voice, even if I didn't. "Elena?" he croaked, the name sounding like a plea for mercy. "Don't call me that," the woman in the shadows replied. Her voice was devoid of warmth, like the turning of a lock. "You were told the account had to be clean, Mark. You were told no loose ends. And yet, here we are, with a disgruntled wife and a federal investigation breathing down our necks because you couldn't keep your ego in check." The kitchen lights flickered back on, buzzing aggressively. Standing behind Mark was a woman I had seen only once before, a sleek, sharp-featured figure in a charcoal trench coat who had attended our charity gala last year. She held a suppressed pistol with the casual, terrifying ease of a professional. She wasn't an officer. She was the cleanup crew. Mark's knees gave out, his bravado dissolving into a pathetic, whimpering mess. He dropped the gun, the metallic clatter sounding like a gavel strike. "I can fix this. I have the data. I can leverage the firm. I can—" "You're a liability," she cut him off. She looked at me then, her gaze flicking over my face with clinical detachment. "Sarah, leave. Now. Your car is parked 3 streets over. Don't look back. Don't go to your mother's house, and for God's sake, don't use your own bank accounts for the next 6 months. You were the bait, and you played your part perfectly. You're free." I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I felt no triumph, only a hollow, ringing numbness. I turned on my heel and walked out the back door, stepping into the damp, cool air of the garden. Behind me, I heard a single, muted thwip, a sound so soft it wouldn't have woken a sleeping dog. I didn't stop. I walked through the shadows of the hedges, my heart drumming a frantic rhythm, my eyes fixed on the distant streetlights. I reached the car, a nondescript sedan I had purchased with cash weeks ago, and fumbled for the keys. As I pulled out onto the street, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The house stood quiet. The blue lights from the police cruisers were still flashing, but they seemed distant now, like something happening in a movie I had already walked out of. I drove for hours, heading toward the coast where a new life, a new identity, and a new set of rules were waiting. When the sun finally began to bleed over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold, I pulled into a rest stop. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out the small, heavy thumb drive I had swiped from Mark's gym bag before the police arrived, the one he thought was just a backup of his emails. I plugged it into my laptop, expecting to see the final nails in his coffin. But as the file directory loaded, my blood froze. It wasn't his business documents. It was a folder titled Sarah. I clicked it. The first image was me, sleeping in this very bed, taken 3 weeks ago from a camera hidden inside our smoke detector. The second was me sitting in my lawyer's office. The third was a photo of me, taken only 10 minutes ago, sitting in my car at this very rest stop. My breath caught in my throat as a text notification pinged on my phone from an unknown number. "You didn't walk out on your marriage, Sarah. You just followed the script we wrote for you. Welcome to the firm. We've been waiting for a replacement." I looked at the driver's side mirror, my reflection distorted by the dawn light, and realized with a jolt of pure, icy dread that the car behind me, the one that had been following me for the last 50 miles, had just pulled into the space directly beside my own. I hadn't escaped the trap. I had merely crawled into a deeper one. And as the passenger door of the black SUV next to me began to open, I realized that the nightmare was only just beginning.